Welcome back to my channel, everyone! Alright, without further ado, let us dive straight into the recap of Tsukimichi, Moonlit Fantasy Part 57. Alright guys, in the previous part, Makoto started checking on Tomoe and Mio's fan clubs, discussing the possibility of humans living in Asura, and handling business relations with Koran City and the Sea Kings. So, in this part, the main focus is on the position of the Kuzunoha Company, which has grown even stronger in Sige after the city became independent. On the other hand, there are also several important meetings with major companies such as Rembrandt and Muzo, while new threats begin to appear from bandits and assassins who are starting to target Makoto. Now, let us continue to part 57. The story begins in one corner of the city that is beyond the surveillance of the Rembrandt Company. In that place, several people are discussing the current situation, including the Kuzunoha Company, which is attracting more and more attention from many sides. The main topic that immediately sparks a heated debate is the appearance of an ancient technique called Great Lily, which Makoto previously used in Rotsgard. One of them questions whether that technique is truly the church's secret ritual, which has long been considered nothing more than a myth. However, another member explains that Great Lily is indeed a secret technique that was lost even before the church moved to Limia. Because of that, its historical records are no longer held by the current church. From that conversation, it is clear that they are starting to see Kuzunoha as a real threat after the demons. The problem is, the conflict with the demons is still not over, but now the Kuzunoha Company has suddenly appeared and seems to have become another major problem. They continue discussing the best course of action for the future. However, in the end, they decide to settle the demon problem first. After the meeting is closed, Cyrits, an influential figure from Laurel, who is apparently also present there, immediately returns to her residence in Sige. However, not long after that, she uses a special magic staff and instantly moves to a forest. In that place, a man from the elf race is already waiting for her. In that secret meeting, Cyrits explains that she deliberately directed the focus of the previous organization to prioritize the destruction of the demon race, so that her own position would remain safe. The elf thanks her for that cooperation. Now, at this point, Cyrits also admits that she greatly admires the Kuzunoha Company, to the point that she is willing to betray her own organization in order to build a good relationship with them. For her, in a time of war like this, power is far more important than mere knowledge and caution. The meeting ends with a secretive smile from both of them. After Cyrits leaves, the elf who remains in the forest realizes that the world is truly being stirred up by Kuzunoha. He has seen many great nations collapse before, but this is the first time he has seen the great powers of the world rendered helpless, without even being able to fight back at all. Now, he only needs to watch how the conflict between humans and demons will end, or perhaps how the era of the goddess herself will end.
少なくともあんたよりはね。
Some time passes after Tsige officially becomes a nation. Fortunately, the Kuzunoha Company continues to achieve great success. Their goods sell extremely well, to the point that Makoto no longer needs to worry too much about managing the inventory in detail. Every day, the goods that have just been supplied are immediately sold out in an instant. For Makoto, this phenomenon feels amazing, but also quite frightening. Entering the third day of that busy period, Makoto briefly thought about doubling the stock of goods. His intention was simple. He wanted to reduce the workload of the staff, who had to work overtime counting inventory, while also keeping the store open later because they had to wait for new goods to arrive. Makoto felt extremely grateful, but at the same time, he also felt bad for all of his loyal staff. When he asked one of the Eldwa craftsmen about that day's schedule, it was revealed that there were 3 important matters that Makoto had to attend to personally as the company representative. Meanwhile, the rest would be handled by Tomoe, Shiki, and the newly formed Foreign Affairs team. Seeing how packed the schedule was, Makoto realized that his work would not be finished until the evening. Even so, he still offered to take over one of the tasks from the Foreign Affairs team, so their burden would be slightly reduced. At first, the Eldwa staff member was worried that Makoto was pushing himself too hard. However, Makoto reassured him that he could still handle it, and promised that he would not be late for dinner.
度を扱うのが難しいよね。
The first customer Makoto had to deal with that day was Patrick Rembrandt. Makoto was a little surprised, because the head of the Rembrandt Company always came to visit every week. As usual, Rembrandt started the meeting by praising the new things at Kuzunoha. He always gained inspiration whenever he saw how the Kuzunoha Company worked. This time, Rembrandt was interested in the ceramic art that the Kuzunoha company had started developing. So, the main topic of their conversation still revolved around company matters. After that business was settled, Makoto returned to managing the company's work and began creating several new products, including products made from bananas and ceramic flower pots.
仲間と相談して決めたことだ。
Meanwhile, various companies in Tsige began moving quickly to tear down old buildings and rebuild their city. Thanks to the construction techniques and new working methods introduced by the Kuzunoha company, the major companies began to feel inspired as well. The Couple Company, the Rembrandt Company, and other companies were now busy opening new business opportunities. From there, Tsige's development began spreading into many fields, from entertainment, toys, and road construction to city redevelopment. Makoto's relationship with the companies in Tsige also slowly improved. The Kuzunoha company was no longer seen as a threat, but had started entering the circle of high-level companies in Tsige. Makoto himself was now starting to be recognized as a true merchant, no longer a beginner who knew nothing. He even introduced bento and rice to the major companies in Tsige, while also inviting them to work together. In short, some time passed. After Tsige City became independent, a term began to spread among the adventurers: regular patron. It was a title given to people who could freely come and go from the Mist Town. Of course, the adventurers felt extremely jealous of that status. After all, the Mist Town was still a major attraction for many companies, because many valuable goods from that place could be resold. Meanwhile, inside the magnificent reception room of the Muzo company, a commotion broke out. A rough-faced man and his guards were causing a scene, loudly protesting the company's failure to fulfill their order for rare materials. Watching the chaos from behind the scenes, the Muzo representative could only frown. He complained to his secretary that the company's future looked extremely bleak, even though their current sales numbers were rising sharply. Realizing that his company could collapse if he kept forcing things, Muzo finally took emergency action. He ordered his secretary to cancel all schedules for that night, then immediately hold a crisis meeting. On the same day, Muzo came directly to Makoto at the Kuzunoha company. He stated his intention to speak privately, because this time, he needed a much more serious business discussion than their casual conversation at the Hot Spring Villa before. That sudden visit immediately made Makoto feel uneasy. Until now, he had thought that Kuzunoha's relationship with material supply companies like Muzo had been peaceful, without any major problems. However, from there, Makoto began to realize that the restructuring conflict among the major companies in Tsige could no longer be treated as someone else's problem. Slowly, that heavy situation began dragging Kuzunoha into the middle of the merchants' competition. At that time, Makoto and Muzo were supposed to discuss the main topic, which was the rare material crisis currently hitting Tsige. However, strangely, Muzo lost focus instead. His eyes were fixed on the stack of cards in Shiki's hand. Instead of immediately talking about his company's serious problem, Muzo asked Shiki to show him how to play with those number cards. Seeing how the bosses of Tsige had recently become more and more unpredictable, Makoto could only give in. He then invited Shiki and Lime to play cards together with Muzo. Here, Makoto introduced those cards not as gambling tools, but as entertainment. According to him, Tsige City was still very weak when it came to entertainment, so the cards were made to provide a healthier game option. After that, Shiki calmly dealt the cards and explained the rules. The game was quite simple. The players had to use addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division with the numbers in their hands to reach a certain target number. Although these rules were actually designed for the orphanage children and might not be very challenging for adults, Muzo looked extremely enthusiastic as he paid attention to them. Not long after that, Lime, who had briefly gone downstairs, returned with snacks. However, instead of bringing nuts or salami, which would have been more suitable to accompany a card game, he came back with several bowls of hot chawanmushi, a Japanese steamed egg dish. The fragrant aroma of the food immediately caught Muzo's attention. When Makoto asked what was inside the chawanmushi, Lime's answer successfully shocked Muzo. Casually, Lime explained that it contained bird meat and a mixture of several rare mushrooms, namely water bamboo, poison fire coral, and amber inky cap mushroom. Now those mushrooms were exactly the source of the major crisis at the Muzo company, to the point that their customers were furious. As soon as he realized that, Muzo's eyes immediately lit up. With complete confidence, he felt that his decision to come to the Kuzunoha company that day was absolutely the right move. In the end, amid the card game and the warmth of the chawanmushi, a major business agreement began to form between Makoto and the representative of the Muzo company. Several days passed. At that moment, Makoto had just stepped out of the merchant guild while stretching his body. He had just finished a series of business meetings with Tsuge's elite merchants, who had been specially introduced to him by Patrick Rembrandt. Although that series of meetings felt extremely exhausting, Makoto understood that all of them still brought great benefits to the Kuzunoha company. One of the main topics that the merchants kept discussing was security. It was true that the threat of monsters outside Tsuge had started to decrease as the city expanded. However, the problem was that those monsters now seemed to have been replaced by bandits who often robbed cargo on the main roads. While Makoto was thinking about that problem, Toa's party came over to him. There, Makoto and Toa began talking. Toa explained that Tsuge's security situation really needed more attention because crimes had been happening more often lately. When she found out that Makoto was heading to the Bronze Company, Toa immediately offered to act as his guard. However, she would not walk openly beside Makoto. Toa chose to follow Makoto in secret by using the ability from her Tobikato job. After that, Makoto deliberately passed through a road that was rarely used by people. Not long after, 3 people immediately blocked his path. From their movements, it was already clear that they were bandits targeting Makoto's belongings. However, before they could do much, all 3 of them were immediately knocked unconscious and tied up by Toa. Not long after that, Makoto noticed that someone else was hiding. That person suddenly shot an arrow at him. Of course, Makoto managed to dodge it, then threw the arrow back toward the attacker. That counterattack immediately tore through the person's shoulder. Toa, who had only just noticed the attack, was immediately shocked. She asked whether that sniper was connected to the group of thugs from earlier. However, Makoto casually answered that their combat abilities were far too different, so they were most likely not related. Toa then realized that the shooter had a killing instinct on the level of a trained adventurer. After that incident, Makoto continued his journey. As they walked, Toa explained that her party would stay in Tsuge for the time being to help the guild restore order and improve the city's security. Hearing that, Makoto felt happy because Rinon would surely be very glad if her older sister could be home more often. Makoto then teased Toa by asking when Hazal's harem wedding party would be held. That playful question immediately made Toa flustered. However, while Makoto was still talking with Toa, someone was watching him from afar. That person turned out to be the partner of the attacker who had previously tried to kill Makoto, even though the assassination attempt had ended in failure. After confirming the situation, that person went to his hideout. However, Tomoe was already waiting for him there. Seeing Tomoe in that place, the person could only fall silent and shudder. His name was apparently Ruki. Tomoe admitted that Ruki's scouting ability was indeed quite impressive. However, because Ruki was involved in the assassination attempt against Makoto, Tomoe had no reason to simply let him go. In the end, Tomoe handed Ruki over to Mondo, and Mondo would continue handling the matter. After Tomoe left, Ruki shuddered even more because Tomoe knew his real name without needing to be told. He truly could not understand the power of the people in the Kuzunoha company. Ruki then screamed in frustration. To him, this capture was not just luck, but the result of careful calculation, as if the Kuzunoha group had known every one of his movements from the very beginning. However, Mondo immediately corrected that thought. According to him, the luck being mentioned was the fact that Ruki was still alive after daring to attack Makoto and facing Tomoe directly. Hearing that, Ruki could only lower his head in resignation. He regretted his reckless decision to accept that suicide mission. Now, he understood that his fate was completely in the hands of that mysterious group. Meanwhile, Makoto was discussing with several Tsuge merchants about an effective way to create a transportation system for carrying goods, while also discussing the bandit problem that had begun disturbing the trade routes. There, they also talked about road construction and the use of Kuzunoha-made miniature golem dolls as substitutes for horses. Makoto was quite surprised by the forward-thinking vision of these merchants. They were not only thinking about the current problems, but had also started thinking about how Tsuge should develop in the future. At the end of the meeting, the merchants asked for permission to officially discuss matters with the dwarf craftsman from Kuzunoha. Makoto gladly agreed and promised that he would ask Baron to meet them. After that, Makoto stepped out of Bronzeman's workshop with a relieved feeling. However, right at that moment, a telepathic message from Tomoe entered his mind. Tomoe reported that thanks to Makoto being used as bait, they had successfully captured a very useful assassin. Hearing that, Makoto felt a little annoyed because, indirectly, he had been used as bait by his own guard. However, his irritation immediately disappeared when Tomoe added that their dinner menu that night was soba. With much lighter steps, Makoto hurried back home to his company. So, that is the recap of part 57 from Tsukimichi Moonlit Fantasy. What do you think? Pretty interesting, right? After Tsuge became independent, the position of the Kuzunoha company became even stronger and started truly entering the circle of Tsuge's major merchants. Amid business growth, new partnerships, and threats from bandits to assassins, Makoto once again showed that Kuzunoha was no longer just a small company. For now, it feels like there is nothing else that needs to be explained, because everything is already moving toward even bigger developments in the next part.